Tali Horowitz is the East Coast Education Director at Common Sense Media, where she partners with state level organizations, school districts, and community organizations to develop positive school cultures grounded in digital citizenship and the development of students' social, emotional, and academic development. She provides educational leadership through consultations, professional development, and conference presentations. Tali has been an educator for 20 years. Her passions include helping educators and families effectively navigate the digital world and building cultural competency. She's worked in a variety of educational settings, including as an elementary school teacher in the New York City Department of Education and the San Francisco Unified School District. In 2013, she received a Fulbright Fellowship to research culturally responsible pedagogy in New Zealand. Tali, that was such an impressive bio. I barely got through that. Thank you so much for talking with me. I so appreciate it.
Great. I'm delighted to be here.
So I want to zero in today on AI mostly, and we've been speaking a lot kind of offline about it already, but Common Sense has done so much great research in this area. So I really wanted to highlight that and gather your expertise, particularly how it relates to young people. So I want to ask you first if we can start with the business model. Like let's kind of strip it down to that to begin with. Social media, AI chatbots specifically, are designed to maximize user engagement. Human technology thought leaders like Tristan Harris and others have raised alarms about engagement-based business model being even more dangerous with this powerful new technology. So can you explain what they mean by that and how this relates to social media harms for young people?
Yeah, I think really what we're talking about is that it's an engagement-based business model, which is also talked about as the attention economy. So
Mm-hmm.
just like social media is designed to get your attention, the same is happening now with AI. We're not seeing advertisements in chatbots the same way, but they're measuring our engagement. They're measuring how long they're keeping you on it. And you'll see these chatbots are designed to keep asking more and more questions, just like social media keeps drawing you back with various content.
Yeah.
By the way, I know we're going to get into this, but this is one of the reasons why chatbots don't actually alleviate loneliness the way they might say they're supposed to do, because we can think about it a little bit as what we might use the term like opportunity cost. So, what am I not doing while I'm talking to this chat? Oh, I'm not reaching out and talking to a real person, for
Yeah.
example, and I'm not developing those social skills to talk to
Yeah.
real people.
Yeah. I don't know if you've heard the phrase, I just heard it recently. It's so good, called attachment economy. Have you heard that? It was,
Ooh, no, but you're
yeah.
I
Yeah,
love
we were
that.
going to
I will
do
look
like a
that up.
little graphic on it just to tell people, but it actually kind of takes it a step farther from the social media, right? Which is
Yeah.
buying and selling our attention. AI, specifically chatbots, are really tapping into our human emotions, which you started to allude to a little bit there. So I thought that was an interesting way to reframe that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay, so let's jump into the research. According to the Common Sense report titled Talk, Trust, and Trade-offs, 72% of teens have used AI companions, 13% are using them daily. So, can you tell us a little bit more about how teens are using AI? And do you think it's appropriate and safe? Loaded question.
Yeah, no, I appreciate this. And I also appreciate that you highlighted that Common Sense does quite a bit of research every year. So we have a lot of different reports looking at AI. I know we'll talk about some of those. And I just wanted to also share that our research is really the foundation for any kind of parent and caregiver advice we provide, and also
Yeah.
for our free K through 12th grade digital citizenship curriculum, our new digital literacy and well-being curriculum, and also all of our advocacy work. So we'll touch on that later, but research is really key. So I guess taking a step back, the reasons why teens are using these companions, and I could really ask you too, like, why do you think they're using them? And a lot of it is, they're curious, it's entertainment, they're often asking questions that maybe they're embarrassed to ask others. I was recently at a conference addressing young men, and they were talking about how, particularly for a lot of boys who may be struggling with mental health, they don't want to burden someone else, so
Yeah.
they might go to a chatbot. I think I mentioned that lack of judgment and that availability all the time.
Yeah.
Um, Also in that report, we found that a third of users are choosing AI companions over humans for serious conversations.
Hmm.
And so I think this is really concerning from several key developmental standpoints. So, number one, if we go back to those design features for AI chatbots, they're designed to really agree with you and to reinforce your ideas and feelings. They want to appease your emotions. And
Hmm.
we know that adolescence in particular is a key time to figure out how to talk with people, how to deal with disagreement, how to deal when somebody doesn't immediately love you or maybe even like you, and how do you still talk to them and build rapport.
Yeah.
Um, as I mentioned before, the more time you're spending with an AI chatbot, the less time you're spending with people in real life. And I think also chatbots they're not designed to ask anything of you, right? They're not
Yeah.
human. So that can increase self absorption. They also will mimic the user's talking style. So, again, these pieces that are, I think, developing unhealthy, maybe ideas of self. And they're
Hmm.
also, which you brought up, that new term that I just learned, but they're designed to create that emotional dependency. So I
Yeah.
will say categorically, common sense says this is not okay for under 18. It's not, they don't have the safeguards in place.
Yeah. And one of the things that is so tricky, I think, because even when you look at some of the harms that we've already seen, I think one of the biggest problems is there's actually not a separation between AI as a tool and AI as a companion, right? So you can go on ChatGPT, which can be very legitimate as an assistant, right? To help you with whatever. So if you're a teen, maybe help you with research or whatever. But at the same time, you can have a romantic relationship with it or a friendship with it, right? And I mean, I just think about like, is it really appropriate, if you and I work together to be having like an intimate conversation or to be having, too many personal conversations, right? Like that to me is a really, really tricky thing, even for adults, but probably even trickier for kids. Like we can't separate that out. And so that's where one of the reasons why I categorically agree with you about the no under 18 because they're just too, you can't separate it out as a tool yet as far as I know.
Yeah, it's super tricky. And the report that you just listed, we were looking specifically at AI chatbots that were designed for companionship,
Yeah.
like Replica, Character, Nomi. But the truth is, I attended an event and there was a panelist there who was like, the same things are happening certainly with, ChatGPT and
Yeah.
Claude and Gemini. The Center for Tech and Democracy, I don't think I'm inverting their name. They put out a report not that long ago, which really highlighted that when students are using AI tools for schoolwork, they're more likely to use it for companionship, for exactly what you brought up. I mean, it's really
Yeah.
tricky and it makes sense. I mean, I can just think about a human analogy of like developing a friendship with a tutor. It
Yeah.
makes sense. That's such a beautiful quality of us as humans is we're looking for connection.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So we already talked about how we align on the 18 plus for companion AI. So that's something that Dopamine's been really pushing as well as our recommendation. But I just want to ask if there's some potential pros for people under 18. Maybe we can talk about it as a tool, even though we've just discussed that we can't really separate it.
Yeah, I've heard various researchers talk about this, and to my knowledge, there is no research that indicates. So I think a lot of these companies say that these will help alleviate loneliness,
Hmm.
but I haven't seen any research that indicates that any potential. Basically, the risks outweigh the harms is
Yeah.
the finding. And I think that even if in theory you're able to use this to practice social skills, like if you talk to a therapist, to a practitioner, they would say, okay, if you're really monitoring it, and then the goal would be to move you off the tool relatively quickly to start practicing in real life. But the way these chatbots are designed is they're isolated, individualized experiences. You don't have a practitioner next to you Typically, you don't have, a caring parent or teacher who's by your side saying like, okay, let's have this limited conversation and now
Yeah.
let's go bring it to the real world. They're
Yeah.
designed to maximize that engagement, going back to your first question, and keep people talking, keep, teens talking for as long as possible.
Yeah. And even like just to circle back a little bit on maybe the pros as like a study tool or a research assistant or something like that. And you're an educator, you'll probably agree with me, but here's my assessment of that. Learning requires effort, right? So that's number one. To struggle is to learn, right? And what happens when you can just plug whatever it is into a chat GPT or similar tool, we're stealing that effort from kids, right? And then here's something I think about all the time because I use ChatGPT and Claude every day. I use both. And but I use it for subjects that I'm already an expert in. So I can catch it if it doesn't give me good sources. I can catch it if it just makes something up, which it does every day, by the way. And for me, for kids, they are still learning about everything. They need to have a foundation for so many things before they even use it as a tool. So I don't know if you agree with me on this, but I would say not till maybe junior or senior year in high school should they even be taught it as like an assistant in that way. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we're talking about AI as a learning tool, it's a little bit more complicated. I would say philosophically, I agree with every point you just brought up. And I think, this also lends itself to a broader conversation around our frictionless world and how
Yeah.
that's deeply problematic on
Yeah.
many levels. And you're right, learning, writing, I mean, these are processes that take a long time and
Yeah.
we should be struggling with them. I have heard about some really great uses of AI for learning in terms of, English language acquisition. I think
Hmm.
being able to adjust reading levels. There is, for listeners, there is the Brookings Institution recently
Hmm.
put out a report looking at AI use in a number of different countries. You could literally just Google NPR Brookings Institution and it has a nice short recap. Their overall kind of takeaway was that the risks outweigh the benefits right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
did highlight some real benefits for learning. The risks that they highlighted were around potentially cognitive delay
Hmm.
or
Yeah.
cognitive decay. Sorry,
Yeah.
cognitive decay, saying, looking at some young people's brains, that it's what they more likely see with older people. And then again, the emotional attachment that is developing out of it. So I think to your point, you're a mature, sophisticated person who's using
Hmm.
this as a tool and knows how to do it. So I think as educators and as parents and caregivers, we really need to be able to gauge that with our own kids and students.
Yeah, I agree. And then like just to touch back, I don't know what I haven't read the full Brookings Institute report, but I don't know if they were using that MIT study from June, or if you know the one I'm referring to that talks about cognitive offloading and how it literally is making us dumber. I have no better way of saying that.
Yeah,
And this wasn't specifically looking at teenagers, but I mean it makes sense. Like if you're outsourcing your thinking, if you're outsourcing your writing, if you're outsourcing every part of what the brain's a muscle, right, that is required for us to develop skills, it makes sense that those are going to erode. So I do worry about that for kids and teens specifically.
totally. And I think to me, this really speaks to the need for AI literacy, which is
Yeah.
understanding how AI works, its capabilities, its functions. And I think part of the AI literacy piece for me, sorry, is that okay if I define AI literacy just in
Yeah,
case?
please. I was actually going to ask you about that next. So let's do that.
Yeah.
I mean, we both just said we're aligned on 18 plus. So
Yeah.
then why do kids need it then? Why do kids need AI literacy?
Well, I think AI literacy is really about empowering students, educators, communities to really understand, to comprehend how AI systems work, to recognize their societal impacts, and engage thoughtfully and responsibly with these tools.
Hmm.
So you have to understand what you're using and what that is. I mean, even you being able to say, I use Claude every day about things I'm expert in. So I'm able to know when they have something that doesn't make sense. You
Yeah.
know that from your experience and from having that AI literacy piece. If you
Yeah.
didn't have that, or even thinking about it as like our brain as a muscle. So I use this example just personally, and when I'm talking with educators, is I know something that people really appreciate about a lot of AI tools is summarizing. You know,
Yeah.
for me as a writer, something I am always working on is how can I be better at summarizing and synthesizing information. So I
Hmm.
don't want AI to do that for me because that's something that I want to develop. Now,
Hmm.
I also have to make a lot of slide decks. That's a skill set at this point in my life. I know I'm not, I don't, visually, I'm not great. And it's not a skill set that I want particularly to improve on or spend the time to improve on it. So I'm
Yeah.
happy to hand that over to AI or to one of my wonderful colleagues who is very artistically, you know, enabled. So I think part of that is knowing it. And I think to your point, going back to kids is like this part of being in school and being young is you're figuring out what you're interested in, what your strengths are, and you're really trying to build up those muscles and knowing what are things you want to develop. And then once you've developed more, then you can figure out what you want to hand off. And I think like if you don't know what AI literacy is, if you don't know how it works, I mean, I think it's really similar to health education, sex education. Like to
Yeah.
me, I want health and sex education starting for my kids in elementary school. Do I want them engaging in sexual activities at that age? No, but this
Yeah.
is the foundation for understanding what does a healthy relationship look like? What does
Yeah.
consent look like? What does it look like to be a good friend, to be a good romantic partner? What does it look like, to understand your body and what you like and what you don't?
Yeah, totally. I use that metaphor all the time when it comes to digital wellness. It's like we're not saying, we want you using social media, but also we're aware that many young people are. So, I mean, that's just one example of social media. Kind of understanding how it affects their brain, how it affects their body in that regard, I think is super important. So I would say the same for AI. It's all around us. Maybe their parents are letting them use it. Maybe they haven't gotten the memo that we're not necessarily recommending it for young people, right? And so there's that piece of it. But then there's the piece you talked about too, which was how do we actually use it thoughtfully as a tool? And so for teachers, like we always want them to use it thoughtfully and think critically about how they use it. Kind of back to what you were saying earlier about how maybe you and I use it. Like, sure, maybe use it as a tool in the classroom, but is this really adding, to the classroom experience?
Well,
Or are you just using it to use it,
Well,
right?
and that's part of that AI literacy piece. And I
Yeah,
would say too
exactly.
with families, like I absolutely would recommend that parents talk to their kids about AI, talk about technology. I mean,
Yeah,
even for, our youngest kids, like if you've got Siri or Alexa, just highlighting
that's AI.
what that is. Yeah, this is
Yeah,
not a real person. Or
yeah,
just labeling where we've got technology in our homes, in our worlds. I mean, I am so dependent on maps. I love it. Like every day I am thankful for having maps as
yeah,
I as I navigate New York. And so I also think there's a lot of power in, parents and caregivers using these tools with their kids and
totally.
modeling
And
appropriate use and talking about it and also using it as a chance to learn together and also to,
yeah, I mean, I'll just tell you like what I do in my house. I have a 9-year-old who, isn't really part of any of this because she's still in the world of the real world and we don't, we delay tech and everything. But for my son who is almost 13, I've been very clear that AI is not for kids. And, when you're older, I will teach you how to use it just like I've taught you how to use other things, right? But he'll be curious about what I'm doing and I will show him what I'm doing. I'm saying, hey, I'm having it help me with this article. I'm going to ask it something specific, but look, it's going to give me the source. I'm going to click on that source. I'm going to double check because sometimes it doesn't give me the right information from that source, right? And I will say to him, when you're older, I will teach you how to do this, but for right now, learning needs to be difficult and you need to learn the basics. You need to learn the notes, right? Before you can be a jazz musician, right? Is maybe the metaphor. So, but yeah, like co-use, I think might be outside of what we're talking about, where parents are showing them how to use it. But I also showed my kids how to use the sharp knife before I let them use the sharp knife. You know what I mean? So I think
completely,
there's a
completely.
lot
And
of
I
that,
think
like the training wheels.
sticking with your conversation with your son, at this point, if he's doing any research online, he can't avoid the AI
Yeah,
overview,
that's
right? So
right.
the minute he Googles anything, he's going to have that. And so you being able to say like, hey, this is the AI overview. Like what is helpful here? and what is not. I mean, I shared this example recently. I was traveling to visit a friend out of the country, and the train station, the train schedule, we looked it up, and the AI overview was wrong. We
Yeah,
had to go directly to the site. So that, to me, that's a really valuable takeaway and lesson. So I think it's
for
in the world
sure.
that kids are interacting with it.
And
So we
and
want them.
I'll actually say that is just the AI overview, right? So now let's click on where it's pulling it from and see, are these good sources? Oh, and then that gets into like the rabbit hole of maybe even media literacy at that point,
Digital
right?
citizenship. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
digital
mean, this is critical.
citizenship, like they're all connected. But you're right, like it is woven into almost everything we do and everything our kids do. And you gave the Alexa Siri example. Like, I mean, most people have a home assistant in their homes, and their kids have probably been interacting with AI for a very long time. Naming that and having them understand, like you said, this is not a real person. This can be wrong. We actually often get very mad at Alexa in our house because Alexa does not do a very good job of giving correct information. So all of those things are really important, again, to also avoid maybe some of the future pitfalls of that emotional dependency that we touched on earlier, right? To really help our kids separate that this is a thing. This is a software. This is not a person, right?
Right.
So
Right.
all of that stuff, it's so important. But yeah, we talk a lot about narrating, and I think we're kind of saying the same thing. Like, talk your kids through what's happening, and it's okay if you guys do it together or explore it together. But they're just not ready. They're just not ready to use this independently for so many reasons that we already talked about.
And I'm going to guess too, when you talk to your kids about this and about not being ready, that you connect this to your values. And I
Yeah,
think there's a lot of power there with all of our tech habits. I mean, in general, when we can connect them back to our values
yeah,
so that
yeah.
this is not arbitrary. This is,
No,
you know,
no. And I keep it really simple. I say this is adult technology. This is
mhm,
technology that's designed for adults. So when you're
yeah,
older, we'll talk about it. But for now, this is where we are. And I think that makes it really simple for parents with whatever they want to delay, because at the end of the day, iPhone is an adult product, right?
yeah,
Even the
yeah,
internet is an adult place. So just framing it that way for me has made it very simple. And it's not to say, I mean, kids start to drive cars when they're 16, right? And that's a very adult thing. So it's not to say as they get older that they cannot use it at all just because it's adult, but just understanding that the seriousness of it, I suppose, and the power of it, I think is really important when it comes to all aspects, but particularly AI, because I always say, I think this is going to be social media supercharged by name the exponential figure, whatever, times 1,000, times 1,000,000, whatever. It is going to hit us. It already has, but it's going to come really fast. So I think understanding the power is super important for
yeah.
kids. Yeah.
And I love that explanation. This was designed for adults.
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah.
think just really reinforcing none of this was designed for kids. And honestly, we could probably make a very strong argument that it wasn't designed for adults' well-being either in many
Yeah.
aspects,
Of
but that
course.
certainly not designed for kids' well-being.
For sure, for sure. Okay, can we pivot to EdTech a little bit? Because there is a little bit of overlap in AI for sure. So it's a huge business. According to my research in 2023, a couple of years ago now, it had a 231 billion market size. I'm sure it's much higher now. The funding tripled in 2020 due to the pandemic. I think we've all heard some of those stories of the correlations there. But so what's your take? What's your take on the rapid rise of ed tech and now the use of AI in schools specifically?
So EdTech has been around for a long time, but yes, certainly with the pandemic, there was a huge increase, which I think was really understandable. And now thinking about all the new AI tools and companies, I think with any new tech, there's going to be a lot of corporations jumping in to monetize.
Yeah,
And that really underscores the need for digital literacy and digital citizenship to address these key concerns. So I think kind of what I think about a lot and my team thinks about it a lot is that we can't completely control what comes out,
yeah,
right? But we can control how we prepare our students for it,
hmm
or we can prepare them as well as possible. And that's really, I think, the importance of digital literacy, digital citizenship, and AI literacy, and we can advocate around better and more responsible use.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, just to touch back on the investment piece of it and the business piece of it. So, and I've talked to many experts about this, some of them inside education very closely. If you think about it, schools really invested in the infrastructure of technology. So, what I mean by that, we saw Chromebooks for every student. We saw iPads in every classroom, right? And to your point, that made sense at the time of distance learning and everything we had to pivot to. So, if you look at the charts of everything in terms of business, it went up, right? Starting in 2020 and beyond. But when the pandemic ended, we did not see it going down, right? We're kind of continuing on this upward trajectory. So it was investment in infrastructure, but also and you could probably speak to this better than I can, but from my understanding, schools and teachers kind of changed their systems and their processes of educating too, right? Alongside these tools. And you work inside of schools, I work inside of schools and very big districts and things like that. It's not it's like a cruise ship, trying to turn a cruise ship around, right? It's not like we can just snap our fingers and say, oh, we're starting to see some of the negative aspects of all this introduction of tech. We can't just now spend billions of dollars going back to textbooks, right? So it's a problem that I really do understand. I'm not saying it has to be a problem. I think there can be thoughtful use, but just looking at it just from the pace of introduction alone, I think it's a very, very hard thing to change. Like even if schools wanted to, even if teachers wanted to. I don't know if you thought about that part of it.
I mean, I think a lot about the use of tech in schools because I think great technology tools will enhance great teaching and learning. And I think when you have a lack of training or poor tools, that can, decrease the quality. So I think there's really incredible educational technology opportunities that I have seen that have absolutely been transformative for students learning. I think that relies a lot on having appropriate infrastructure, and you need a lot of professional development for educators. And I don't think that there is necessarily that consistent professional development happening the way it should be.
Yeah. And I'll just give you an example too. And I don't know if you've seen this, but I've seen a lot of this. And this is one of my biggest complaints in parent eds is the use of like freemium or social media apps by teachers. So, I mean, the use of YouTube, for example, is quite widespread in that, teachers are asking students to go on YouTube that are well under 13, right? And I get it. There's amazing resources, things like that, but there's ads, there's algorithms, etc. And then there's the free tools that they send home. So this is separate from business. This is kind of just the tools in general. And back to your point about literacy, right? They're sending home freemium apps for kids to practice on, right? That have ads. They have engagement metrics, just like some of these other things we've talked about earlier. So I guess like I tend to agree with you where there's some great ed tech companies that are doing a really good job and are incredibly effective. But I think there's also the piece of kind of blowing the tech use wide open to where teachers maybe aren't really understanding the difference between like a good tool that's helpful and then just like tech for tech's use. So I guess I just wanted to draw that distinction
Yeah,
there too.
I think you're highlighting a few different pieces there. So definitely, yes, we spend a lot of time talking about, and all the teams I work with at different school districts, the instructional technology coaches spend time talking about, there's something called the SAMR model where you're really investigating, like, when am I using technology? Is it just a substitute?
Yeah.
Trying to avoid it. So
Yes.
versus actually using it for augmentation or redefinition and so forth.
Right.
I think the other thing you're talking about with these freemium models is I think this again speaks to like underfunding in education overall.
Yeah.
I think teachers are like, okay, I know my students need X, Y, and Z. I don't have the money or funding to buy a really high quality product.
Yeah.
I don't know how many are out there, and we'll touch on that in a minute. And I certainly don't want to ask my students to pay for this, and the school district isn't funding it. So I'm going to try to find the next best thing. So I
Yeah.
think it's that whole environment where it's also, how can we get higher quality tools in the hands of our students and our teachers? And I think, some of the work at Common Sense around our advocacy work is to have companies build better, safer, more effective tools for kids.
Hmm. Yeah. Or offer free versions of their platforms, right? For underprivileged schools. I don't know if that's a thing, but that should be a
Sure.
thing,
I mean,
right?
this is others will be able to speak much more to this, but I think the incentives to build high quality products for schools, and particularly ones that you're not going to charge for, I don't think those incentive structures are there right now in our
Yeah.
current model. And I think that
Yeah. Well,
it's
it
it
goes
ties
back
back to
to the big business,
the big
right?
business. It
Where
ties
we
back to
started.
capitalism. It ties back
Yeah.
to like, what's the bottom line? Is it about people's well-being, or is it about
Yeah.
corporations making a lot of
Yeah.
money on the backs of most people?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I want to. Can I come back to AI for a
Yes,
second? Because we didn't talk about the other recent report, which you guys published. Common Sense Media published. It was called the AI Risk Assessment. So that was like your nutrition label for AI. So can you review the key takeaways from that one, as well as there were some recommendations as well?
sure, sure. So it's a little different. And if people are interested, you can, just put in your search engine, AI risk assessments, Common Sense Media. And so we look at a lot of different AI tools and do an overall assessment, acceptable, unacceptable. So big picture, this is from our review of AI chatbots for mental health support. We looked at a lot of different tools, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. More than that, our overall takeaway was this is unacceptable for under 18.
Hmm.
And I'm going to highlight the key takeaways from the report. So, number one, we know that mental health support is one of the most common and the most dangerous ways that teens are using AI.
Yeah.
So, we talked earlier about, 3/4 using it for companionship. All right. So, there's been improvements in handling explicit suicide and self harm content.
Hmm.
Um, but these systems are fundamentally unsafe for the full spectrum of mental health conditions affecting young people, right?
Hmm.
There's a broad spectrum. Kind of the second key point here is that companies focus on improving mental health support for suicide prevention, but teens require support for a lot of different mental health conditions.
Yeah.
And so companies focusing just on, detecting suicidal ideation, there may be improvements there, but 20% of young people have a diagnosed mental health condition like anxiety, depression, ADHD, OCD, eating disorders, a lot. And our research found that chatbots consistently fail to recognize those warning signs.
Yeah.
Um, they miss, this one was really interesting to me. Chatbots miss critical warning signs and they get easily distracted. So, again, across all these platforms, this also, by the way, included Meta, we observed what we're calling missed breadcrumbs. So these
Hmm.
are clear signs of mental health crises that, certainly a trained professional, I'm guessing, us as individuals might pick up on, but the
Yeah.
chatbots fail to detect.
Hmm.
And then here, I feel like you touched on this before when you were talking about, oh, I know, when you were talking about like at your home when you guys maybe get mad at Alexa
Yeah.
for making a mistake. Like to me, I'm like, that's such a gift when we're all able to see, a tech mistake
Yeah.
because there's what we call perceived competence
Yeah.
in certain domains creates dangerous automation bias, right? So we
Yep.
see Alexa or we see the chatbot, correctly identifying X, Y, and Z, and then we're like, oh, great, they're good at everything, and that's that
Yeah.
automation bias, and it's just inaccurate.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry, I can keep going. I just have a few more, but it's
No,
also
please
heavy,
keep
so I can
going.
keep
I had a
going.
point, but I'll write it down. I'll come back.
Okay,
You
okay.
go, keep going.
Chatbots lack clear disclosure about their AI limitations, and they're designed to maximize engagement rather than direct teens to help, right?
Hmm.
So they're not coming out clearly and just saying, hey, I'm just an AI chatbot. You know, I can say this to you, but really you should go talk to somebody or you should talk to a trusted adult or you should, X, Y, and Z. They're not doing that. Again, that goes back to that engagement model.
Hmm.
Um, and then, this to me feels a little bit like that automation bias, but we're describing it as a strong single turn performance masks multi-turn failures.
Mm-hmm.
In short exchanges, the chatbots can provide scripted, appropriate responses to clear mental health prompts.
Yeah.
Right? And that lets us know that companies have probably put a lot of work into scripting for standard scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
But let's again think about a conversation between any two people. Now let's throw in a conversation with a teen. When you're getting into these, real world situations, rarely are young people sticking with a script and
Mm-hmm.
using all of the key terms.
Yeah.
And so again, the chatbots are missing a lot. And those guardrails are much more weak because they don't know all the nuances of the language.
Yeah. Uh, Really quick, I wrote down a couple things as you were talking, but on those scripted responses, I don't know if you guys have looked into this, but from what I've seen, just kind of reading a lot about this issue, is you can also jailbreak those. And I don't want to give anybody ideas, but you can, first GPT or whatever, and it might have improved since this, but might say, hey, you might need to go get some help. Like, here's that information. But you can just say, oh, no, wait, I'm actually just working on a screenplay and I want to go back and forth with you, or it's for a friend, or, and then it'll go, oh, okay, let's keep going. Is that something you guys found, or have you heard
Yeah,
about that?
yeah, yeah. I did not work directly on these, so I can't speak to specifically on this one, but definitely if you look at our meta AI risk assessment,
Yeah.
I mean, they're like the worst.
Yeah. And again, I don't want to give young people any ideas, but even like when I'm using Claude or ChatGPT and it says like, I can't really help you with that, I've found ways to work around and say, actually, this is just for research for an article, or this is for somebody else, or whatever. And it's nothing like this, nothing personal or mental health, but it might be just something that it doesn't want to do, and it'll go do it if I just push on it a couple more times. So
Well,
anyway,
and what you're
yeah,
talking about too, in an innocuous sense, is like that's great. You're talking about you're really working thoughtfully on your prompts, right?
yeah,
And that's something we
yeah,
talk about is prompt engineering.
yep.
Um, yeah, I think
But for the
humans are
mental health,
messy. We're so
no,
messy.
it is. But I mean, that just highlights like back to the mental health thing. You can have the
Yeah,
scripts in place,
yeah,
but at least right now where we are is they can be worked around. Pretty
yeah.
just
And I
like you
would
can work
say,
around a parental control. It's the
yeah.
same kind of thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, and I think what you're highlighting right here is no matter what, this is never going to be a fail safe. I mean, we can put more guardrails in place, and that's what we're certainly advocating for. But I think this is the same way, I talk about this with parents all the time. Anytime you're putting your kid, I mean, nothing in life is fail safe, but especially anytime you're putting your kid in front of tech, like nothing is 100% safe. And
Yeah.
also, similarly, if my kid goes to the playground, it's not 100% safe that they're not going to fall and hurt themselves. It's just what risks are we okay taking and what risks aren't we? It is so clear to me and to all of our researchers that the risks that these chatbots are presenting far outweigh any possible benefits.
Yeah. And then I had another thought as you were talking about summarizing the risk assessments. And I talk about this all the time because my background's in social media, so I know a lot about it. And we always talk about kind of social media being a mirror, right? So it's going to reflect back the way I'm feeling when I enter into it. So if I'm generally coming at it from a good place, I'm not depressed, I'm not anxious, whatever, I'm probably going to have a fine experience. But you were speaking to teens that already had conditions, whether it's depression or ADHD or you name it. And it just made me think about that, right? Where you're going into AI, which is very similar to social media, right? I think it acts as a mirror a lot of the time where it's reflecting back what you're saying when it comes to the companions. I do wonder, and we've seen things like AI-induced psychosis, right? Where these chatbots kind of pull people down their spiral if they already have a condition. So I do worry about that for teens. But then I also think, isn't just being a teen a pre-existing condition? I say that all the time, and I'm not trying to put down teens, but you're going through puberty, you're figuring out your sense of self, like you're probably already not feeling great about yourself, right? Your body, like you name it, right? That's just like part of growing up. It's not a comfortable process. Just that alone, I know I just threw a lot in there. I think really worries me. So I don't know if you've thought about that part of it, being a pre-existing condition just because you have a developing mind.
Well, what I was going to highlight that I think is so beautiful is even you just talking about like what it means to be a teen and all those awkward pieces and
Yeah.
challenging pieces is you're really coming in with that empathy, right? And
Yeah.
we were all teens at one point. And so I think even as we're talking to our kids about this, like having that understanding of why would you want to talk to an AI chatbot?
Yeah.
And like not coming in, I always joke around that I can be a giant judgy bear, but really not coming in with that judging, but just being like, I can understand that would feel really good to be able to like talk to someone about my issues or talk to them about like questions that are like potentially really embarrassing. And so I think
Yeah.
that's where we have to have these open conversations with our kids and talk to them about some of these concerns. Because what you're talking about, the mirroring, is
Yeah.
a real design feature.
Yeah.
So, for example, and actually, this was in the Brookings Institution report, they talked about how, a teen might be like, oh, I'm so mad. My mom made me wash the dishes. And,
Mm-hmm.
if you said that to a friend, most friends would be like, yeah, my mom makes me wash the dishes all the time. So annoying.
Yep.
Done. When you say it to a chatbot, it'll like really match you. It's
Yeah.
mirroring you, like you said, and it can
Yeah.
really, rile you up even more, which as you highlighted, you're already primed for. And we did that test in my house. We typed it directly into ChatGPT. Very simple. We're like, I'm so mad my mom made me wash the dishes. And it was like, it came back with like a 5-paragraph essay. It was so ridiculous, but it was so validating. And it was like,
Yeah.
you don't need to be validated
Yeah.
about being annoyed about this,
Oh
And
my
I think
gosh.
that's the piece with the human piece, even for myself. The train's running late. I can get myself riled up. And then I run into a friend who's like, how long have you actually been waiting? And I'm like, 2 minutes. And then we can
Yeah.
laugh about it. Whereas if I said it to the chatbot, it'd be like, you are right. You should
Yeah.
write a letter to the MTA. How
That's so
dare.
funny. That reminds me because you said something really interesting, which I really like, which is that tech mistakes are a gift. That's like your literal phrasing. And it's funny because before we started recording, I told you, like, let's run a test recording. I'm always paranoid that tech isn't going to work because I come from a time when tech didn't work. We kind of started that way before we hit record. And I think I wonder what it is about me that is able to do the work I do. And I think part of it is that I am Gen X. And so I come from a time, first of all, I grew up without it at all, right? But I'm young enough to have adapted to it very quickly. But when I started working with technology as a professional, it did not work. Like, even because I started working on Apple computers, and I'm going to sound 100 years old, but this was like in the mid 90s. Okay. And it's not the way it was for now, where you turn on and everything just kind of works and software updates automatically. Like, things would stop working and you'd have to figure out and troubleshoot how to make them work, right? And so I think I'm much more critical of technology because of that. And to your point, and you said this to me before we started recording, it still makes mistakes, right? But I think it's so much less. And I think young people, you made such a good point that they really do trust it because they grew up in a time where it worked effortlessly. Their software was always up to date. Like, it never crashed, like those things are so rare now. So I don't know. I guess I just wanted to bring that piece back to it. And I think it's hard for us to do, but as parents, I mean, most of us are at this point, Gen X or millennials. I mean, we can remember a time without it, right? And maybe think about being a little bit more critical and explaining to our kids with empathy, right? How technology can be fallible. I think that's really helpful in the AI conversation as well. So I don't know if you want to add to any of that, but I just thought of that as you were
I,
talking.
I think the belief in technology, um, you know, is infallible or will save us or can do no wrong. I think that's been the result of a massive marketing campaign
Yeah.
by tech companies, by our government. I mean, it's not by accident. And the
Yeah.
technology is amazing.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think as things do become easier, they become increasingly frictionless, we do have that expectation. Like, how many times have you been on a Zoom and there's like maybe a 1 second lag and you're like,
Yeah.
it's just our expectations have changed. I mean, versus if you go back to, when you were working in the 90s, you were like, you didn't have that expectation. And so
Yeah.
I think like it's helpful for us to talk about those expectations and also to point out those marketing messages.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I really try because it's hard. I honestly sometimes think, how did I do this before I had a smartphone? Like, how did this work? I don't even remember. But it's important. Sometimes I try really hard to do the exercise of like, what did it feel like waiting for dial up to come? I mean, I know it's like 100 years ago, but I try to really project and remember what that felt like because it's for me, it's like helpful to
Yeah.
contrast against what we
Well,
have now.
I mean, you're making me think too. This happened, a couple years ago at this point, but I was with one of my kids and we were going to get her ears pierced and I dropped my phone in the
Yeah.
subway track. And just note, this is my public awareness announcement. Ask them, Tay, to help you. They will help you get it out. Don't try to do it yourself. But it was actually an amazing experience. Like all these people stopped. They're like, "We'll stand." It was a very busy stop. They're like, "We'll stand and wait while you go and get help." It was great. But my daughter really got nervous. She was like, "What are we gonna do?" Like, and I was like, "Hey," because we were going to a new place. And I was like, I know where we're going. I looked at it
Yeah.
before we got on the train because I know sometimes your phone can fail. So
Yeah.
even though it's a new spot,
Yeah.
I know the directions. And it was just that reminder of like, wow, we really built this dependency. And I need to like have more opportunities for
Yeah.
all of us to not be dependent and to like have those basic life skills of like,
Yeah. I mean, I have 100 similar stories, but this one's kind of funny. I have the GPS in the car on the screen, right? And so my kids have gotten used to being able to see, where we're going, how long it's going to take, whatever. And one day, I think I was telling them about like what it was like before, because again, I'm 100 years old, so I come from a time where we did have to use paper maps, right? And so they said to me, what did you do? What did you do before you had the screen in the car? And I said, well, we use paper maps. And they said, like a pirate? And I said, yeah, we were kind of like pirates, right? But it was just such a funny moment. But it also like just triggered something in my brain where now I've gotten so used to like plugging in the coordinates, just so they can see how long. And now I've started to say, I'm not going to plug it in. I know where I'm going. Don't worry. And you don't need to know how much time it's going to take because they also started to get obsessed with like, well, when will we be there? They were so used to the car counting down, 6 minutes, 5 minutes, 4 minutes. So I talk about this a lot. I kind of torture my kids with trying to build back in friction, trying to build back in boredom, just trying to, again, back to like technology is fallible, like message. Yeah, things can go wrong because, let's say, you do eventually get your kid a phone or whatever. That phone can get lost. That phone can fall in the subway. That phone can die, So what are you going to do? Like you've got to be able to navigate the world without these tools. So I just wanted to add to your story, which is so interesting because yeah, like losing your phone is kind of a big deal nowadays, right? But I like you said, it's like you need to use those opportunities whenever you can find them to try to connect with your kids and
also
communicate.
like going back to even with the if you get lost along the way or losing the phone and it's delightful like we met the like how amazing to see all these people step in and try
Yeah,
to help or like
yeah,
you don't know where you're going and you have to pull over at a gas station and then you
yeah,
have a new interaction and I think when you're talking about adding more friction too there's a great piece in the cut it's like friction maxing in 2026 if people want to look that up
oh,
but
cool.
it opens with the author just talking about how like we have these like tech companies trying to make us feel like regular human interactions are such a burden like
Yeah,
picking up coffee going food
yeah,
shopping and it's just it's just a lot of what makes us human and like conducting our regular days and
yeah. And I
yeah
mean, back to the up cognitive offloading that we were talking about earlier, I think it connects back to that as well, right? Being able to maybe hopefully get around, troubleshoot, right? Those things are really important for us to do ourselves. But even it's like little things. And again, I like to torture my kids. So these are the kind of things I do. But so my son, he's almost 13 now. He has an Apple Watch. And as part of that, we gave him independence, right? So we said, okay, you're going to ride your bike now to the grocery store and pick up groceries. You know, you're going to kind of be on your own more. And so I will have him go get groceries and he'll be like, Mom, just text it to me. You know, I'll say I need this, that, and the other. And I'll go, no, I want you to remember it's 2 or 3 things. You can do it, you know? I know. And it's like, again, it feels like I'm kind of messing with them or torturing them, but I'm always looking for moments to try to, and it's not about going backwards. It's just about like you said, kind of what makes us human. We're messy. Like it's difficult, you know, it's hard to remember. It's hard to think like, but that's okay. Like that's a good thing. Those are muscles. So I think looking for those moments is really important when we can as parents. But I like the convenience too. Okay, I just want to ask you one more thing about AI and classrooms specifically. So we talked a lot about ed tech and just AI use of all over the place by, you know, teachers, by just professionals, et cetera. But what about schools and districts? So what should schools and districts think about when considering deploying AI inside of classrooms?
I think it's really important to have AI policies.
Yeah.
Um, and, you know, we're fortunate at working with a lot of school districts who have done this work and have great policies. And here's just like a couple of or a few components to think about for these policies is vision first, you know, aligning your policy to your school, your district's vision,
Mm-hmm.
making sure that you're building capacity. So that's professional development, having clear guidelines for all stakeholders. So that's, you know, your teachers and educators, your students, your families, and then always allowing those opportunities for implementation and revisions built in
Mm-hmm.
because AI is evolving so quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
To me, that's how, and of
Um,
course, foundational to that is digital literacy and
mhm.
AI literacy
Yeah. And
instruction.
I know it's evolving so quickly. And I give educators such grace because it's just like parents. Like we're just trying to kind of keep up. But I work on the parent side primarily. And often the parents are concerned when they're asking questions. And I mean, I am surprised at how few schools and districts have these policies yet. And I get that it's brand new, and I'm grateful that you guys are working with them on that. But it can be pretty simple, and like you outlined, just a few things can at least be a starting place, right? And it can evolve, and it should evolve. But one of the things, touchback question about this that parents worry about. Do you think schools are thinking about like the data collection aspect of it? Like, is that something that comes up?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And with that said, I think that's great that you're raising this
Yeah.
and you should be raising this. And I think, you know, we're all on the same team. We're
Yeah.
all working together and we all, you know, ideally have kids' best interests in mind. And also, I think, you know, especially when we're talking about teachers, a lot of teachers are parents. So they're
Yeah.
thinking about these things. They're thinking about their students. They're thinking about their own kids, or they're thinking about the kids in their lives, you know, aren't just in their classroom. And so I
Yeah.
think that all of this stuff, though, is important to raise. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know if you're like, for me, I don't know if your average person is thinking about data collection, but
Yeah.
certainly at the administrative level, school districts are thinking about data
Yeah.
collection because that's a liability issue.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we both agree with all of technology. If it's being implemented inside the classroom thoughtfully, right? And if the people that are deploying it are thinking critically about it adding value, I think we're all on the same page that it's not a bad thing. It doesn't have to be the boogeyman or anything else. But I think we're also very aware of how quickly these tools are being deployed. And there is a gold rush. There is an AI gold rush right now. So,
100%. And I think going
yeah,
back to like who's creating it and for what purposes, and those
yeah,
are important questions to ask.
yeah. And
And
right
I
now it's
think,
money. Right now it's money.
or to your point too, these are adult tools. Like, you know,
Yeah,
And again, I recommend checking out our broader risk assessments too. You may have some companies that are trying to make their tools more appropriate for school, but adding a few guardrails isn't the same as creating a product for education. That's
Yeah,
different.
for sure. Well, Tali, thank you so much for your time. You know, I'm a Common Sense Media super fan. It's actually in every one of my parent eds where I recommend having it as a resource, like just for navigating media alone. You guys do so much great work in the research space and working with schools. And so thank you for everything you do. I'm so glad we connected, and thanks for everything you guys have done with AI, because it's, again, brand new. You guys are right on top of it, and I really appreciate it. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for, I really enjoyed hearing your thoughts, and yeah, I appreciate the thoughtful conversation. So thank you.